Okay. Okay. Are we ready?
Yes, carry on.
Okay. Then, Jon Auty, thank you very, very much for joining me. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. Author of Behind the Stunts. Would you like to introduce
Yes.
yourself further?
Well, I am that Jon Auty, as he says, author, Leo, fan of food, that sort of thing. But yeah, I've spent a large proportion of my life being involved in the action and stunt industry in some shape or form, primarily reporting on it or writing on it, whether it be from a magazine or newspaper perspective or internet perspective. But certainly of late, it has been in connection with Behind the Stunts, which is a project that I kind of started, I would say, about 2006, 2007 time, which kind of started life out as a magazine, and then became, as we know it now, as a podcast, as a website, as a the social medias have one of each, and it's a celebration of stunts. It's a celebration of the action and those individuals that do all the work to make these movies that we love so much, the action pictures, so exciting. If they didn't have those, they'd be very short movies, I suspect.
Absolutely. And
With almost no plot in them whatsoever. And it would be a bit like those villages where they have the welcome to and thank you for driving carefully through our village, those signs back to back. That's pretty much what movies would be like if you took the stunt people out.
absolutely.
So that's
Especially
all it
the
is.
Bond films. I mean,
Especially the Bond movies. It's a love letter to stunts and action, and the book that is due to come out next year, Bond Stunts, will be that. It is a celebration of all of the action and the stunts in the Bond pictures, and it's trying to I suppose give the public a better idea of what happens behind the scenes in creating the action, as opposed to maybe many years ago in the old Western movies where you used to have a guy, the assistant director would go outside and go, right, who wants to earn $20? And some bloke would stick his hand up because he hadn't eaten for 2 days and say, right, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to throw yourself out of that window there, and you see that big hay bale down there, land on that. Right, lovely. And he knew that if he did it, he's going to get himself $20, and if he didn't, he's going to get himself free room and board in the local hospital. So there was always going to be a tick in a box for some of these guys. And over time, they've progressed, so they've understood, they've taken the risk out of the whole thing, and they've done all those risk assessments and done as much as they can. But there are some people in the world who still think that that's what stunt people do. So I'm here to try and tell them, no, it's not. It's not that. This
it's
is
quite
what.
a profession, right? It's a very skilled profession.
Oh, certainly. I mean, as I say, you have to make comparisons with what's gone before, and although that's not a bad thing, you do look at the way in which that curve has increased as far as training, discipline, agility, ability, for a start off. The individual concerned, back again, they started off as cowboys, back in the old
Yeah.
West, and those stuntmen that people often refer to as the old time stunt guys, like Yakima Canutt, for instance, who was the guy who kind of revolutionized the way that we looked at action on film in movies like Stagecoach back in 1939.
Oh, yeah.
And he subsequently became one of the premier stunt people, as it was referred to, in the business. He doubled John Wayne. He was in lots of movies. He was an actor for a period of time as well. They had shorts, where they would have like two reelers, and they would have 15 or 20-minute short movies, and he would star in movies. There were lots of other Tom Mix, for instance, and some of these characters from those days who needed somebody to do the dangerous stuff for them, and then that kind of progressed onto Chaplin and Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd and those kind of guys when they moved from horses to transport, in other words, whether it be motorbikes, trains, aeroplanes, you name it. And it kept going. So you suddenly found that this guy's really good at this, but this guy's particularly good at this, and this guy can do both. Ah, well, it's very good. So he's going to get maybe more work because he's one person who can do both. He can split himself, thinly through different productions, and that's kind of what happened over time. And nowadays, I say back then, people were approached and said, "Hey, you look a bit like this guy, the actor that
Mm.
we're doubling, and you'd be very good. Come down to the set and maybe try the outfit on. Hey, look, you look really good. And why don't you you see those steps over there? Well, if you throw yourself down them, we'll give you some money for it." And they're going, "Really? Is this a job?" That's how
Mm.
it kind of started back in the old days, back in the West. Nowadays, somebody and a stairfall is never considered as just a stairfall. It's still very complicated because there are different types of sets of stairs. There are
Mm.
carpeted stairs in a house. There are office stairs. There are concrete steps outside. There are ones with railings. There are ones without banisters. There are all sorts. There are spiral stairs. And you have to approach each of them very differently, which means that contact with each of those stairs as you go down means that you have to wear certain padding in certain areas that maybe you wouldn't wear in different staircase falls, etc., etc. And
Yeah.
when you do that with experience, so and they have coordinators who work it all out, and you know, you never learn how to. That often you see these people who are doing what's a really good example. I'm trying to give you a good example of something on the top of my head, and I can't just off the top of my head, but there's something will come to me. But there's you don't go at that time. You never went through a course that showed
Mm.
you how to do falling, stair falls, horse falls, knocking down by a car, etc., etc. The
I'm thinking of
first
the stair fall in the Blues Brothers, right at the beginning,
on
where
a
the two,
chair, right,
yeah,
with
on
a
a chair.
desk. I mean, and that was done
Who learns
for
that?
real. That was Eddie Dono, who was the stuntman who did that. And Eddie Dono and Gary McClarty were the two stunt guys that doubled the leads. And again, Eddie had done stair falls before. Nobody had ever fallen down a flight of stairs inside a desk, which is what he was.
Yes,
He was sat in. He was in the chair and the desk,
it's a
and
child-sized desk and table, right? And it's it's not convenient to
you
fall in.
know, I mean, just one of those very very strange things where it arrives in the script, and this is the next scene,
Mm.
and of course the director had been a bit of a stuntman in his day.
Ah.
Um, Before John Landis had been a bit of a stuntman in his day before he came into directing. He does a couple of stunts in American Werewolf in London, in point of fact.
Oh.
Um, and so he said to Eddie, "Look, I just don't know how you're going to do this, but I guarantee that speed is going to be of the essence," which is it's common sense
Mm.
from a stairfall point of view, because you want to get to the bottom as quickly as you possibly can and get it over and done with. Now, if you're that's when you're falling on your own. He's in furniture,
Yes,
and to throw himself down that is a remarkable piece of footage, and it is a
it's
blink and you'll miss it moment. Now
absolutely.
that may have taken the same amount of time to prepare for as that car crash at
Mm.
the end of the movie, right?
Yeah.
Which started as, let's have a 10 car crash, and then got to 20 or 50 or however many it got. And then in the subsequent sequel movie, they did 150 or however many they did. They got bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
But that probably took the same amount of time to prep that as it did to do the little stairfall thing, but nevertheless, that's the same thing. You have to put the same amount of work into one as you do with the other.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's interesting as the audience, it strikes you differently, right? For me, with a car crash, that's the exciting big action scene. With the
yep.
chair fall, I mean, my first reaction is laughter, and then I realize, hang on, there's genuinely a man in that chair going
Yeah.
downstairs. It kind of hits afterwards as I'm thinking, kind of feeling my back in sympathy with the man.
Yeah. It's those moments, and that's there have been stunt performers over the years who have performed the most extraordinary stunts,
Mm.
the ones that are referred to as death defying.
Yeah.
They always have that inverted commas death defying thing in front of it, but they're worked out clinically.
Mm.
Everything is down to the last detail. There is always a flaw somewhere in that plan, and as soon as you find that flaw, you find where that weakness is, that point where it could all go wrong. You've then taken that into consideration, and you feel, right, I'm okay because that's the problem area there, but I've got a backup system here. And if I need an out, if I need to get out of this situation, well, I'm going in this direction because that's the air is traveling in this way. If it's hanging onto a vehicle, or I'm going to be jumping clear here, whatever the deal is, there's always something to work out. Whereas in certain cases, walking down the street, you could fall off the curb and kill yourself. It's that
Yeah.
simple. You could inadvertently slip, trip in the street, hit your head on the ground, and that's it, lights out. But you're not inviting it.
No.
That's the other thing. With the work, it's always there in the back of your mind, and you do everything to the absolute last minute detail. You've worked everything out, and this is going to go as per all of the rehearsals that I did before, and you just do it again. Whereas, walking down the road and slipping on ice and banging your head, well, you couldn't plan
Yeah.
for that. You've done everything, and that you're wearing the right clothing, and you're trying to walk carefully, but still there's that little something that takes it out. So, it's convincing. I think that from my point of view, it's been convincing the public that this is actually some really massively important job
Yeah.
in cinema, and
Well,
it's as
again, I mean,
important as
as you say,
sound. It's as important as editing. It's as important as everything else.
it's funny, right? It's funny. There's been such examination into fashion designers and costume designers, makeup, all these things, but stunts for a long time seems to have been hidden away. So actually, discovering your series was like peeking behind the curtain,
Yeah.
especially for the Bond films. Actually, I'd never seen any explanation of how they did it.
Right.
It seemed to be off the menu. Looking at how it's done.
Well, again, I think if we look at some of those early periods in cinema, I touched earlier on Harold Lloyd was a very good example. Um, Harold Lloyd, firstly, I mean, he's a very agile individual, but he had a physical deformity. He'd lost three fingers on one hand,
All right.
um, and he lost it in a there was an it was a it was a photographic stunt which had gone wrong. Somebody handed him, I think it was it was for promoting a photograph. So he had the boater on, and he had it was handed a bomb, the word, a black cylindrical thing with a fuse and the word bomb written on the front of it, and he's doing some sort of expression into camera as the camera was taken, and the thing went off. It was actually a charge, and it
Oh
went
wow.
off, and he lost three fingers on his right hand. Now, take Safety Last as a good example. Safety Last, of course, one of his most famous pieces to show his agility as an individual,
Mm.
where his character is a window dresser in a shop, wants to promote this new store, has been told he has to promote the store, otherwise he's going to lose his job. So make sure you do it
Mm.
properly. And across the street, he sees a human fly, a
Oh.
guy climbing a building. He thinks that would be sensational. What a great way to promote the window dressing and the opening of this new store. And so I think something along the lines of he's trying to get hold of the guy and he can't, or the guy's given it a bit too much of this at lunch, and you can't climb because he's too drunk. So he decides to do it himself. I think that's what it works. So he climbs the building, of course, gets up to the clock face, and there's lots of things along the way. And of course, he's hundreds, thousands of, I don't know how high he is above the street, but he's hundreds of feet above the street. You can see the street below, and he's doing lots of climbing, and he has to hang on the side of the building. Well, when you look at it on film, you realize he's only hanging with one hand
Mm.
because he can't hang with this hand. He has a glove specially made.
Oh.
So he has five fingers on his one hand. He has three fingers on. No, he has two fingers on the other hand, but he has a glove that has three additional fingers on it, and they've got something in them. But he
Uh,
can't move them terribly well. So, being right-handed, he wasn't able to do what felt natural, what came natural to him, which is hanging on with his biased hand.
mm.
So he's had to overcome all of that bits and pieces. Now, he died in 1965, um, and he had an agreement with his stuntman. His stuntman was Harvey Parry, and Harvey Parry did all of the actual physical climbing on the outside of the building. So when you see shots from the ground looking up, it's a real skyscraper. That's Harvey climbing that building. And then the insert shots are Harold, but that's on a separate separate stage, which is created on top of an adjacent roof on the street. So it gives the impression of height, and it gives the impression that he's actually climbing the sim building that's there. So it's done very cleverly. But the agreement was that, and from the studio as well, the studio said nobody is supposed to know that that's not you climbing that building.
Right.
So there was a contract signed, and to that effect. And the agreement was that when Harold died, Harvey can tell the world that's okay, cool. But he had to wait until 1965. Of course, by that time, nobody believed him. Was the other problem? You go, what,
Yeah.
really? You know, he's had this bottled up for the last 30, 40, 50 years, however long it was. And of course, he was eventually, he was able to have proof, and what with video footage and being able to slow images down. Oh, look, that's not Harold. No, it's me. That sort of thing, So there was agreements back then, and stunt people were kind of put on the back burner and said, look, you're just here to make this guy look good. That's your job. Nowadays, that's still the case in certain individuals. A lot of stunt people, many will say, no, I don't want the limelight. That I don't want to know. I don't want people to know what I do, because the job that I do is simply I'm doubling for the star. And if people go, wow, did you see that guy do that? Yeah, that's okay. If they want to believe it's him, super. But they don't need to know that it wasn't him. And then there are other types of stunt people who go, yeah, look, that was me, and here's the photographs on my Instagram page, or here's the whatever it is. So it is a very different world now, but slowly but surely, the message, I think, is getting across to say, there are people out there who are doing this for a living, and it does touch on the fact that there are certain major bodies. For instance, the Academy, who still have said, no, we're not doing that just yet. We're not recognizing them just yet. Whereas the Emmys are, SAG are doing it. The other award organisations are doing it. So why not? But
there's no Oscar for best stunt, right?
There's no Oscar for stunt. Full stop.
Yeah.
No, there's nothing. I think
I
there
find
is.
Interesting. So it was kind of Roger Moore was pretty open about having a stunt double even run for him, which seemed extraordinary at the time. I'm not sure if that's particularly was a trend beforehand. He kind of got a reputation for it. He seemed very willing to credit people.
Well, absolutely, and Roger was. There are a couple of really good, particularly from that period. Roger and George Lazenby. For me, the two of them are spectacular at throwing a punch. That screen punch. Roger. Well, it's a John Wayne punch for those people listening to this. This is not going to be great. However, if you're watching it on YouTube, which you can do, watch me now. So John Wayne will bring the punch way back from here, and the guy can see it coming.
Yeah,
right? The character can see it coming. He's not going to go out of the way and move out of the way because he has to receive on the end of this. But the punch is only as good as the person who sells it when it's been dropped. So if you're on the receiving end of that, you've got to make the audience believe that really hurts or has hit you with such force that your head snaps in that direction, and that the camera's in the right place, obviously, to catch it. You snap your head back in the right way, and the camera's in the wrong place. You realize that there's that much gap between the punch and the face, right? So, but Roger, again, as not only as an actor but as a director, and again, he did with the Saint television series, directed many episodes, so was very, very familiar with how a scene should look, how it would work properly. And then from an editing point of view, because he used to spend time with the editor and go, no, I think this is a better shot, or that's a better shot there. So he knew about which shots were better. And so consequently, when he's delivering punches, Bob Simmons, when he was coordinating him, knew he was very capable of throwing these great punches and would just get people in to react really well. George Lazenby, on the other hand, was, as he says himself, a brawler, right? He was a brawler. And again, when he threw a punch, man, you knew he threw a punch. And of course, On Her Majesty's is a wonderful example of putting the right sound effects in, the right. The thing about sound effects, Indiana Jones, the gunfire in Indiana Jones, it sounds like a cannon fire. It's a revolver, right?
Yeah.
And yet the sound, you go, wow! And it also holds about 900 shells. He's never reloaded in his life, I don't think. But again, the punch is being delivered, and the sound effect to bounce off that in On Her Majesty's is such a massive part of those fights and how they are sold. And of course, he's surrounded by terrific British stunt guys who are selling that punch. But I think these two, they're terrific at doing that. But
And you
again,
mentioned these are all British performers, right? So
Yeah.
I've often thought the Bond films are really like showcases for what the British film industry does, right? And stunts really leading the way. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I think because certainly up until Diamonds, maybe. Well, Spy You Only Live Twice is a good example of obviously where they had um, uh, everything, all of those movies, those early ones, set in London, set at Pinewood, So, and also, as many have said, and Vic worked on the picture himself, and he said, look, back then in 1967, there was what 50 stunt guys, actual stunt people who were on a register as such, or something along those lines, who were regulars. Because the register itself, the British Stunt Register as it's known, wasn't really set up until 73. But there were probably 50 who were very capable and used on a regular basis. And out of those 50, 25 of those maybe only rode horses.
Wow.
They didn't do anything else. So it left a group of others to kind of fend for themselves, doing all sorts. On Her Majesty's is another good example because they had to bring in, so they had their team. George Leach took out the best of the British stunt guys that were available at that time, either as first wave or second wave stunt guys, to go out to the Shilthorn for filming out there. But also, he realised that we've got a major ski sequence here, and we don't have anybody that's that good or able to do what is required by the character. So they bring in professional ski people. Willie Bogner then brings in, oh, that's okay, I will bring in my professional ski guys, Olympic skiers, world-class skiers, and that's what it is. If you know somebody who's really very, very good, they at their particular profession, I think that's how a lot of that started. And later on, throughout the series, they've then started bringing people in. So predominantly a British crew, and occasionally you have to bring in somebody who could well be the States, could be Switzerland, whoever it is, France, who is a specialist, because you've created something that people will go, look, I'll have a go, but that's not what you want. You don't want somebody to put the hand up and go, no, this is way too specific, and this could, once it starts bordering the possibility of life and death, then you need to have somebody who's. That's why that amazing car gag in Man with the Golden Gun is so specific. Everything worked out by computer to the last detail, and the guy who drove it the first time he drove it was on the take. Now
Impressive
that's
stuff.
very impressive. Yeah.
I wonder if you could make a comparison to, say, the English Premier League, right? So England has become world famous as the home of football. Not every individual footballer is from the UK. In fact, part of its skill is it's a magnet for talent from around the world. So I wonder if, in a sense, the Bond films are like the British Stadium, and then we fill it with talent, no matter where it comes from.
I think that's fair. I think that the comparison with it, of course, with the Premier League, is because that's where the money is as well. That's where that's why people want to come. The players want to come and play in Britain because they know they're going to have extraordinary sponsorship deals and various other bits and pieces. And maybe I'm not the biggest football fan, so I'm apologise for those people going.
I'm on the edge of my ignorance too. Don't worry.
However, they want to come to this to play in the Premier League from Italy, where there's a very successful league over there, from Germany, where they have the Bundesliga over there, is a very successful over there as well. Japan, all over the place. They want to come here because the Premier League is with those specific clubs.
Yeah.
Manchester Uniteds, the Liverpools, those sort of big teams. And maybe from a filming perspective and from a Bond point of view, Pinewood is the home of Bond,
Mm.
and everybody wants to come and work there. And as we've realised now, with many of the interviews that we've done and many of the people that we've talked to, they could have been offered a long contract on a TV series, on a
Mm.
big TV series. They could have been offered, to double the main star in a big Hollywood blockbuster. And then somebody says, "Do you want to do a couple of days on a Bond?" And they go, "Oh yeah, I want to do
Yeah.
that." And even Gary Powell and Lee Morrison have said themselves that people just go, "Can I have a day on it? Please,
Yeah.
let me just have a day on it." That's how important it is for these individuals who can go anywhere. If you're talented enough and you have the ability, and you have the qualifications which will enable you to work in this field here, or in this field here, whatever it is. And yet they're ringing up the stunt coordinator of a Bond movie and going, "I'm only in town for 2 days. Is there any chance I can just do a day on it?"
Yeah.
I don't, just a background thing, just something. I just have to say I'm on the movie. That's how important it is. And
The
that's never
only
changed, I don't think.
Yeah, the only real comparison I have to anything like that was really the Star Wars prequels being made, where they were. Of course, it's a classic American film, which is largely made in the UK.
Yep.
But people had gotten into the film industry because they loved the original Star Wars.
Yep.
So when they were making the prequels, people were ringing up, and of course Daniel Craig was in one of the sequels because it's just
That's
such
right.
a big motivation of why they got in the first place.
And he only, and he said, was it J.J. Abrams? He had a conversation with him and said, "Well, if was it because Ed Sheeran was in it? I'm sure there was Ed Sheeran was in it, and I'm sure there's a couple of other people." He said, "Well, if they're in it," I said, "I'll do a day on it. That's okay. I don't mind."
Yeah.
And then he gave him a dialogue. No, 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 no. I just want to be in the background. I just want to do this. He said, "No, you've got dialogue." So he had that dialogue scene, and as soon as he opened his mouth, I went, "Ah, that's Daniel Craig."
Yeah.
The big giveaway stormtrooper. But yeah, I think it is that simple. And the fact that the Star Wars is a great example, because um, anybody who worked on the picture, and I was lucky enough to be involved in a documentary called British Bulldogs, which was about the great British stuntman
Mhm.
working on all of these big blockbusters, which came out on a thing called BritBox a couple of months back. It's going to come. I think it's got a Blu-ray or DVD release coming out either the end of this year or the start of next year. And some of the guys who worked on there, and they looked at the thing going, "What is this movie?" It made no sense to them whatsoever, because they saw it every day and they're going, "Really? What is this?" Of course, Darth Vader was David Prowse, who from my
Green Cross
generation, he
Code
was the
Man.
Green Cross Code
Yeah.
Man, and of course was from Bristol, so he spoke with an accent like that. It was quite rural, and so he spoke the lines through the
Yeah.
entire movie, only to realise that he'd been dubbed at the premiere when he sat there with his mother, who was so proud of everything. And then because he'd been in many movies, episodes of The Saint, TV shows, British pictures, Carry On movies. He'd done
Kubrick
all
movie,
sorts.
right?
Absolutely, yeah. Wasn't he in?
He carries the man down the stairs in the wheelchair.
Was that Clockwork Orange? Was he in Clockwork Orange? I see too.
My mind's racing. I just remember that because I know that he actually said to Kubrick, "How much does the actor weigh? How much does the wheelchair weigh? I'm
I
taking
can
him down
do
the
this.
stairs." And then he said, "You're not exactly known as one take Kubrick, are you?"
23 later, I'm still carrying him down the stairs. And the light's not right. For God's sake. Um, but to get to the premiere and then be sat there with your mother and then listen to your first line, and James Earl Jones's voice comes out and you go, "Oh," he couldn't believe it. So,
Yeah.
but that's how important it is. Was those, they looked at this movie and they said, "Really, this is going to be a blockbuster, is it?" Because they did a couple of days on
Mm.
it here and there. There weren't many stunts on Star Wars either. There was probably 10 or 11 guys working on it,
Mm.
and they were just as stormtroopers or as characters.
It's a lot
And
of heavy falls, right? So for the scene in the chasm where Luke Skywalker is shooting up, and the guys are falling down. It's a long fall, and they can't bend at the waist. They're in stormtrooper armor, which is in the
That's
first
right.
one
I
very
think
restricted.
the only there's I've not seen stormtrooper outfits up close, but I think they've changed a bit more now. They're slightly
They
more
have.
supple. But yeah, it was very much like having being covered from head to foot in Tupperware,
Yeah.
uh, as a good example. So Jim Dowdle, who's the guy that falls, or the first guy that falls, when he's got Mark Hamill has Princess Leia.
Mhm.
Mark Hamill has Princess Leia. What am I talking about? Luke has Leia. There,
They
and of
are the
course
same in
about,
my mind, just
I
so
know.
you know.
And they're about to do the rope swing from one side to the other. Of course, he's firing, and Jim is the guy that falls. And yeah, he was blind at the time. He knew where the landing area was, but because of the way the helmet was, he couldn't. If he turned his head inside the helmet wouldn't move. So he was.
Yeah.
There was an awful lot of, I know where it is. I've just got to make sure I hit it right, you know. But that was
I've
Bob's.
even heard from stormtroopers in the first film. Again, it hadn't been worked out. It was quickly rushed out. It was on a small budget. Even walking could be quite painful because of
Oh
where the
yes,
armor digs in
yep,
quite painfully. So
yeah.
falling from that height
I
with
think
a squib underneath, right? There's a bit of fire
that's
coming
right.
out.
I think the phrase chafing was indeed created on that set in Elstree in 1976. They'd never had so much embrocation. I think the onset nurse going, "Really? Where's it hurt today? I'm not putting cream there. Here, you do it." You know, that sort of thing. That's how bad it was. But yeah, I mean, they would, these again, the early days.
Yeah.
And I'm of course great friends with Rocky Taylor, and I wrote Rocky's book a couple of years back. Jump Rocky Jump, still available in bookstores, folks. If you're feeling the urge for something exciting for Christmas, my sons, I've got kids need to go through university, you know. So come on, pull your finger out. And he said himself a thing. He showed me a thing the other day. He sent me a thing on the phone. He sent me a clip of him um, doubling a good friend of his in a movie back in the 50s, and he stood Jess Conrad, the actor, and he stood at the top of the staircase, and the cat, of course, Jess falls down the stairs, has a fight. It's a fight with his father in the film, and he falls down the stairs, and so Rocky steps up to double him, and the prop guy says, "You wearing any pads here?" He says, "What do you mean?" Because they didn't know. Now this is 1959, maybe, just the turn. And he said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you're going to hit half a dozen of these on the way down. You'll probably clout a banister as well on the way down. You're going to need some pads." He said, "Look, come with me." And literally there and then cut him out some foam and some bits and said, "Look, stuff that in there, and you'll need something for your back, and we'll tuck that into your trousers there," and just gave him something to go, right. At least you've got something. And you have to put your hands up to your head to protect your head, but maybe we've got something on your elbow and your knees, and those things that you're likely to clatter on the way down and that you will bruise.
Yeah.
And he said that was my first experience, and then after that he said, right. And then he started going to somewhere and getting stuff, thinking, could you make me something that's this size? Okay. And then he started having stuff fitted, and eventually that's what they did over time, before
Mm.
companies started producing it, or they were using shin pads, footballer shin pads, and whatever it took just to give them some sort of relief on the way down. But you do always feel for stunt women, particularly
Yeah.
because their wardrobe always suggests that they have to be wearing something either revealing or very small, and there's nowhere to put pads. Nowadays they've created. There's a company that have created skin tone padding for the
All
extremities. So
right.
for and it literally it just fits over the elbow. For instance, an elbow fits over the elbow, but it's got the slightest bit of padding to it. Now
Mm.
you bang an elbow, and oh, you have that moment where your life flashes before you. Before you come out with a whole series of expletives you didn't even realize you were capable of delivering, right?
I've done this successfully just sitting in a chair. In fact,
Yeah,
this chair, so I'm being careful where I put my elbow. But let alone
precisely. I mean,
falling downstairs, falling off
something
a boat.
simple as banging a toe, whatever it is. But when you're wearing a small cocktail dress, and you have to be hit by a car, so you have to then. It's a very, very different situation. And nowadays, luckily, there are these products that are available. But back in the day, if I may use such a phrase, that wasn't. Speed was your friend. Get it done over and quickly. Get off the car as quickly as you can, and then we'll patch you up afterwards and cover the rest of it with makeup. So it's you do feel for them that their wardrobe, because of the characters, suggests that it's going to be some. I mean, Sid Childs is a great example of on For Your Eyes Only. She's hit by a jeep on the beach, and she's wearing a
shocking
swimsuit.
stunt.
Yeah, and she injured herself quite badly.
Did the stunt performer genuinely hurt herself? That is something.
Yeah.
It's really shocking every time I see it.
Yeah, no, it's brutal.
It is.
And sand is a very, if that had been a flat surface, she would have had time to get up, jump up, maybe miss, because it had the lamps on the front of the Jeep.
Yeah.
And of course, she clatters the first lamp as she comes up, but of course she's unable to get any purchase on the ground to push herself up because it's sand, so it just moved away from her. So she was hit in the knees and fell forward, and the first thing that hit the car was her head in the windscreen. If you note, when she falls from the car, there's a huge bang hole in there. That's her head going in there. So there was concussion. She got a nasty gash on the knee. Her arm was quite badly damaged as she came off the car the other side. It was brutal, absolutely brutal.
It is.
And yet Martin Grace, who's doubling Roger, is in trousers, has shoes on, so it just has a little bit more something. But she had nothing at all. She was barefoot in this very tiny outfit that wouldn't have had any padding whatsoever. And I looked at it the first time and I thought, well, maybe it's been rotated in the camera. Maybe the camera has been sped up, but it's not. It's for real. It's way too graphic. I think there's a slightly longer take as well. But they kind of cut it down to size. But it's brutal enough as it is. But they're the kind of issues that you get in situations like that. But again, this is the stuff that people don't necessarily think about. Maybe.
No, it is. I say it's a shocking part of the film because it is suddenly hits you out of the blue, and it is. You see this shatter of the windscreen, I think, from behind.
Yeah.
It looks. Well, I guess it looks real because it is.
It looks real because it is. That's right. And sometimes if you try and recreate something that real, it doesn't work.
No.
Not a great. I'm not condoning it, but nevertheless, that's the nature of the
history of stunt women is quite extraordinary because I've heard, it might even been from you, that at some points it's been very difficult to find stunt women. You have to have men doubling women, all kinds of things.
Well, that's very true. There's been many occasions over the years when, for whatever reason, it would have been great to have a stunt woman there. But there haven't been that many to choose from. That's the problem. Where you look at it from a register perspective. I keep using that word register just to explain that I think maybe back in the early days, the 30s and the 40s, it might have been a bunch of guys who knew each other, had worked on a number of productions, and said, come with me. I'm working on this picture. We'll get you some work. Later on, as that progressed, it became a register, a group of people who had met certain criteria, allowing them to be on this list, And then nowadays there are qualifications which need to be met, and very stringent tests that need to be met in various disciplines to instructor level in order to just get on. And that's where we are now. But and there are many women who've worked very successfully in the business over the years. However, because they are very successful, they are in demand in a lot of cases, so they can't be everywhere at the same time, and there aren't the same amount of women as there are men. The men always outweigh the women number wise. And the girls in the States have had similar exercises over the years, and maybe to slightly further issue, because as with a number of books that have been published not that long ago, there are some terrific books if you look wherever you get your books from. But if you search for stunt women, there are a number of very, very fine books which explain the plight of how complicated being a woman in that business has been in Hollywood. And certainly not only, yes, you're the right height, you're the right look for the actress, but the stunt coordinator, well, he's not very, he doesn't like women to be doing this. He rather a guy did it because, all of that sort of stuff. And that was happening a great deal in the 60s and 70s, according to these books there in the US. And it may well have happened in a similar exercise over here. I don't know. But I suspect that if it's happening there, it's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
Times have changed. Things have changed. There's no two ways about it. However, when there are people who are banging the drum and saying that you can't do this. You need to have more women doing this. We'd love to, but you can't, you can't push somebody into doing this type of work. This type of work is either something that you want to do or are able to do, or you don't want to do. It's that simple. It is very simple in that respect.
I think it's fair to say these days nobody's falling into the stunt industry by accident.
No, this is very true. I think, the last person, and again, you've said something there which has kind of triggered me here, but the last person who probably fell into the business in that respect was Eunice Huthart. Now, Eunice, people may know the name because she won a television series in the UK called Gladiators.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Whether you remember that. She won Gladiators, and then she became I think the champion of champion and the international champion of champions, something of that nature. She went on to great things. So from a competition, from a show basis, she won that. She won that competition and was applauded the world over for it. She then received a number of phone calls from a production company for GoldenEye, who wanted her to double Famke Janssen in GoldenEye. And of course, Eunice is from Liverpool. I had the pleasure of having lunch with her one day, not that long after she'd been in the business, probably. And we walked down the street to the restaurant we were having lunch in, and everybody knew Eunice. Hello, Eunice. Everybody. It was the guy on the bike, the milkman, people in the street. Everybody knew her, and she's very funny. And so the idea of somebody ringing up, going, "Is that Eunice? Yeah, we'd like this is the Bond, and we'd very much like it to be." And she go, "Yeah, whatever," and hung up. And she hung up on like 20 or 30 occasions, and eventually, I think it was Simon Crane or somebody else had to ring up and go, "Look, we're deadly serious here. Don't hang up. We are deadly serious. We need you to come in, and we'd like you to test for this particular thing." And that's what happened. So that's how that started. Eventually, to the point where that she was the stunt coordinator on the last Star Wars movie. So that's how things have progressed by accident almost, coming in and doing that. And funnily enough, that sequence that she doubles for Famke is the sauna sequence. That was the reason why she was brought in, because Wayne Michaels was doubling for Pierce, and both Wayne and Eunice are used in close up in that shot. It's not Famke and Pierce. It is both the doubles. And so she produces this extraordinary high kick, which knocks him to the ground, and that's how the whole thing starts. And that's what she was brought in for, because of her agility, and her love of kickboxing and her flexibility. So that's how that started. And now, of course, she's she was Angelina Jolie's stunt double on for many, many years. And of course, was the coordinator there on the last Star Wars picture. So that's kind of the last time when people fell into it by accident. 9 times out of 10 nowadays, they make a decision early on about this is what I want to do for a living. It's an odd thing to do, perhaps, for a living, but that's what you want to do. And if you want to do it, and you've got the ability to do it, and you're able to do it, then sky's the limit. There's no reason why you can't.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's one of the stuntsmen for GoldenEye has a wonderful quote like, for that sixth of a second, I am James Bond. And it's just
exactly. That's right. Yeah, that's
it. Everyone remembers.
That was Simon Crane coming out through that window, and swinging out through the window and landing on top of the truck, and that for that moment, and that's all it is. It's that extraordinary moment. And again, you look at the Connery movies and the Roger pictures, and Connery particularly. Bob Simmons was his double, full stop. So whenever Sean Connery was doing something, which is why um, maybe people don't know this, but that was the reason why Bob Simmons wasn't available for On Her Majesty's Secret Service, because he was contracted very much like the old school stuntmen. He was contracted to the actor. So wherever that actor was, that stuntman would double him regardless of where it was. And when they were making On Her Majesty's, Sean was off filming Shalako with Bridget Bardot in 1968. And so Bob said, well, and Bob went off and worked with him. So that's how that happened. He also got action. What was his title? Action consultant or action arranger. I think he got, it was a rather exciting title. And George Leach took over here. But that's,
And these days we'd say stunt coordinator for that same thing, right?
Yep, stunt coordinator, stunt arranger. Alf Joint was referred to on a number of occasions, particularly by John Landis. We touched on him earlier, but American Werewolf in London, he is referred to as stunt gaffer, which I like very much. It's a very old phrase.
Ooh, yeah.
You're the stunt
has a
gaffer.
Ring to it.
Go and gaff, that sort of thing, which I quite like.
That does have a really good ring to it.
It has, yeah. There's lots of phrases. I think many of them you can't use today, I must admit. But gaffer, I like very much. Which always used to be, governor, gaffer, that sort of stuff. You're in charge. You're always the person to go to, and so you're in charge of the action. You're the gaffer, right? We'll do whatever you want to do, that sort of thing. And I quite like that.
As you say, all these films would be a lot shorter if they didn't have all these stunts, right? They lose an essential element.
It's not, and it is an essential. A quantum of solace would be. I mean, it's short enough as it is, but to take all of the action out as well. So you do have to ask yourself. A lot of that's a good example because they had a writer's strike and they had a number of other issues with the script and various bits and pieces. So that's why there's not an awful lot of dialogue knocking about. Jimmy Bond doesn't say an awful lot in that picture. And when he does
one of my
say
favorites, I wonder if that's the reason why.
But I think it skips along. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Maybe at first when I saw it and I went, "Oh, really? What have they done to it?" And yet over time, really come to like it because it really zips along.
Yeah.
And the amount of flack that pre-title sequence gets, I think it's brilliant because it's supposed to be an hour after the end of Casino, right? All right, he's wearing completely different suit of clothes, but that's not the point. And his hair's longer. However,
the hair I can't justify. The suit, I think there's some video game which shows him shooting his way through Mr. White's house, and that makes perfect sense. Maybe like Jason Statham in The Transporter. He opens the boot of the car, and there's just another suit. Cool.
Just another suit. Oh, lovely! I'll wear that. That makes a lot more sense. But that opening sequence is brutal.
It is.
Oh, isn't it brutal? But you feel like you're right on top of this, and you're in the car with him, and you can feel the bits of the stones being kicked up and everything, and the dust everywhere. It's fantastic. It's absolutely brilliant.
It's one of the strange things, right? It's like when they film a snow scene in a film, the actor is in fact extremely hot because he's under the lights and under so much clothing and so on. When it's summer, he's actually freezing.
Yeah,
I find that the stunts there, without doubt, as you mentioned, there's a lot of health and safety nowadays. There's a lot of planning. He's not just driving.
No.
But it looks so much more intense than, say, some of the chases in Doctor No, which in reality may well have been much more dangerous to do.
Well, there are. I mean, you do hear of stories. I don't think it happened on the Bond, but I am aware of a story that happened for a movie. Early 60s picture, which was responsible for a great deal of back projection, and obviously in those early Connery pictures there's an awful lot of back projection. That chase in Doctor No is a very good example of steering the wheel in one direction and the car eventually going in that direction, and yet you're full lock on and it's still going straight. So but there was an occasion where one of those vehicles actually fell off the back projection unit, or fell off the treadmill, or whatever it is they had it on at the time, and it caused a bit of an injury to a camera operator or something. Now, obviously, you look at that, it would have been safer to put it out on the road, more than likely. Although you look at the type of camera equipment and the ingenuity that's come along these days. So for any car chase sequence these days, they have very, very small, tiny, or lipstick cameras, they used to call them, where they would place them, and so they were very, very tiny. Nowadays, you do see that those particularly the cars with the actors in them, if you're doing that type of shot, will have cameras and lighting at the front of the vehicle, attached to the front of the vehicle, and either the vehicle is being driven for real, or there is a pod on the roof, which means that the stunt driver is actually physically in control of that vehicle and is driving the vehicle, and the actor then has to react accordingly. So they can turn the wheel, they can do that with the wheel, it makes no difference, but they are in charge of
Yeah.
looking like they're driving, and you see the real world going by, you see the real chase car, you see the real squibs going off in the background, because you want to create that whole thing. So it's a safer environment.
Mm.
And you also see those occasions where, and I saw a wonderful piece of, it was a photograph from Frankenheimer's Grand Prix, which had James Garner in a racing car, and strapped to the front of it was a cameraman.
Wow.
And James Garner was doing 45, 50 miles an hour around Monaco, with a guy on the front of. Now, he may not. Garner probably had, limited visibility for arriving
Yeah.
at corners, and particularly a lot of twisty, turny corners that you have at Monaco. You've got to be awful careful. You've got to be in the right place at the right time before you turn the wheel to go in on the apex. Otherwise, you'll overcook the corner and end up in the Armco, And so this
Yeah.
guy is on the top with a camera, and he's lashed on with rope, and it's going, bloody hell, things have really come on leaps and bounds
Well, they carried
since
on, right?
tying
So
Alan onto the front of a car.
Roger Moore's diary for the Live and Let Die production, right, it has not only the cameraman but also the director strapping himself to the front of a boat for the
Yeah,
boat chase. But
yeah,
commenting that Guy Hamilton was in the Navy, he was in his element. But
in
I
his
bet
element,
it's
yeah. And I tell you what, it doesn't have to be on four wheels. Have it on boats. I mean, that was amazing. And then you had a sort of trigger of them over that period of time. What was the other movie I saw, which that type of thing? Gator, which was
oh,
Burt Reynolds movie from
mm,
'76, had a terrific boat chase sequence in that. Anything that involves bayous, then you're going to have some sort of chase around it or over it or in it. But it did. It kind of, and that's what the Bond movies do. They push the bar up.
they
They go, look, this
do.
is what we've done, and then the next thing you know, somebody else comes along and they try to do it. That's what Mission Impossible have been doing for years. We do this, they do that, we try and do this, and it keeps going up and up and up until there just isn't anything left to do anymore.
I'm wondering, where can it go? What is the
Well,
future of stunts, right? I
they're
mean,
space, clearly. I mean, they just sent an actor up the last couple of days. William
William
Shatner, Captain
Shatner,
Kirk,
yeah.
actually went into space and came down and was an emotional wreck. But he couldn't thank Bezos enough for
Yeah.
giving them this extraordinary waft of emotion. Um, but you know, they have what did they have for Apollo 13 and a couple of other movies? They've had the vomit comet, that
Yeah.
thing that goes up and then dives to give the impression of weightlessness. Well, before long, it'll be, they'll do it. They'll send people into the outer atmosphere, and they will film it for real, and it'll be Interstellar all over again, but it'll be on a slightly different level.
That's
So I
funny.
don't
It's
think.
not that long ago. Ewan McGregor was joking about that. He was
Yes, he
doing the
was.
press junket and said, "Oh yeah, the next Star Wars film will be filmed entirely in outer space."
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
as you say, that is the next step. Shatner's been
yeah.
up already.
Um, Pinewood is far enough away if you're outside of London, but yeah, to go that far, Buckinghamshire to Shatner's bassoon, or wherever they refer to it these days as the outer limits. So yeah, that's. But I can see that happening, and I'm sure that. I'm sure there was talk of Mr. Cruise suggesting that at some point on a mission picture to go up
Yeah.
as far as
Well,
it, because he's going to do it himself, isn't he? Which is
of
slightly
course he
alarming.
would.
But
I mean, he is approaching Roger Moore's age in what, A View to a Kill, isn't he? But
well,
he's still
yeah,
at it.
he's still at it because he's still producing the movies. And
Ah, there's no one to
if
tell him no.
well, that's the thing, and that's for me has always been quite worrying. I mean, fair play to the bloke for having the cojones to do the thing in the first place. and he's a pilot. He has a number of fairly serious jets, I believe, in his collection. Motorcycles, speedboats, cars, you name it, he's got it.
Mm.
Helicopters. But from an actor's point of view, he doesn't need to do it himself.
No,
Really,
no.
the technology these days means you don't have to, and yet he continues to do it by being attached to the side of an aircraft when it takes off, or doing a skydive sequence that you don't actually need to do for real, but he's doing it for real. All of these remarkable things. Maybe he's got an agenda of his own. Maybe look, these are things I have to do before I
Maybe.
decide, right, I'm done. And being the producer on your own movies gives you that added impetus to go, I'm going to do this, and I'll take advice from the stunt guys, and I'll take advice from the director, but if you want this movie to work, I'm the star of this picture and I'm the
Yeah,
producer. And if I walk off the picture, you don't have a movie. So,
very
let's do it.
true.
So maybe it's that simple. It's still
I've heard it.
very worrying.
I've heard it said that for a lot of stars, the reason they don't is they're not allowed to for insurance reasons.
Yeah,
If they chip a tooth, it slows down production by a few
that's right.
days. That has cost implications. So I've heard it said there's plenty of actors who'd love to do more, but they're simply told no.
No, well, and that's it. And that has been the case for many, many years. Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford got, was it kidney stones or gallstones or something of that nature? And when he was doing Temple of Doom, they were filming at Elstree or Boreham Wood, one or the other. So instead of the production being shut down, which is evidently what would have had to happen, he went off to go and have this operation. And Vic Armstrong again, he was used in close up for a number of that whole mine sequence
Oh, of course.
in Temple of Doom is mostly Vic, and then there
All
are
right.
pickup shots of Harrison Ford when he comes back, but a lot of the actual physical stuff of swinging from one side to the other and the fights with the guards and the big fight with Pat Roach, 99% of that is Vic.
Mm,
And so they just kept it going and effectively saved the movie. I mean, that's safe to
yeah.
say, because if they closed down for 4 months, um, that would have been a very long overrun, and the budget would have gone up, and then there would have been difficulty about the locations, and there would have been difficulty about keeping the studio or the space that they'd hired for the picture going, because other movies want to come in. So it could have been very tricky, but in order to do that, you keep it going, and there are people who are able to do this. But the Harrisons, he had to be taught. He had to be told by Vic to
Yeah.
go, look, you don't have to do this.
Mm.
Um, there was a moment in Last Crusade where he would jump from a rock on to a guy riding a horse. The horse would then fall. He'd bring the guy down, get on the horse, and ride off. And Vic said, "Look, you don't. It, every time you do that, you're taking money from me because I get paid an adjustment for that." He said, "Oh God, I didn't know." So it would actually sometimes it
Ah.
takes to go. Look, will you stop this? To eventually for that, and they're great mates. They've known each other for years, but it took something like that.
Mm.
Whereas people like Roger, for instance, will go, no, that's not my Martin will do all of that
Yeah.
for me because that's his job. I don't need to do all of that. Yes, I do all my own stunts and I do my own lying, all of that sort of stuff. And so he's very, very accepting of it. Whereas
Mm.
the audience has changed slightly now, and with Daniel in the Bond pictures, they want to see more of him actually doing it. Well, he's
Yeah.
doing an awful lot. He does do a great deal of action. He always has. He's a very physical character anyway. But I mean, also the doubling is very, very good on Daniel's pictures. So he's very lucky to have doubles where they can be used. The staircase fight in Casino is a very good example of the doubles being used a lot in that. Ben, his double, was right there, and used a great deal in close up. But of course, the speed of the editing and all of that going on was just fantastic. So they were very, very good in that respect. But he is very physical.
Mm.
Now they've got face replacement. They've got tracking dots. You always see those photographs with dots on them. Well,
Yeah.
that's primarily because if I don't, you've seen the movie Titanic. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but the boat sinks.
haven't.
I didn't know that, but yeah. So
I've never seen
Titanic.
Titanic, but
You've
I
never
think
seen
I know the
Titanic.
ending.
I'm going to say I'm not going to
think I know.
spoil it for you, but
Okay.
you kind of know what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Well, there is a sequence, and again, this was what 1997, I want to say, and there's a sequence where the two leads,
Mhm.
Leo and
Kate.
that's it,
Yep.
are running towards camera,
Okay.
and behind them is a wall of water which is coming
Mm.
behind them. Now, it's not them; it is their stunt doubles running towards the camera,
Okay.
and this is before they had tracking dots, and the purpose for the tracking dots, just so people understand what it is. Nowadays, you have dots on the stunt performer's face, which will allow the CGI guy to take the face of the actor and put it and seamlessly drop it onto the face of the stunt double. And doesn't matter where they move their head or their eyebrows or whatever, they can track those images, and it's a very fluid movement. So that's very simple in that respect. What happened here was that the stunt double is running to camera, and the faces and the actors' faces are certainly not in sync, and it looks really very, very jarring. It's a very
Oh,
awkward
okay.
scene to watch. It's only in a blinking of an eye, but it's done in slow mo as well. So you've got this sort of big wall of water right behind. You're just willing it to speed up or edit or cut to something else. Of course, they come towards you, and their faces aren't actually lined up. But that was early days of CGI. They could create an entire ship,
Mm.
and build it. And you saw the size of. I don't know if you saw the size of it, but they filmed the thing in Mexico, and the thing was absolutely huge. And when it was up, Gary Powell was one of the stunt guys that was jumping from the boat. Just ship rather, I beg your pardon, jumping from the ship, and it was 90 feet or so into
Oh gosh.
10 or 12 feet of water, something like that. That's a big fall, you
It
know.
is.
And then you swim round the back and you get back on and you dry yourself off and you go back up again. You jump off again because more people need to jump off.
Oh.
And Simon Crane said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going down the shallow end." He said, "You're not. You're coming up the deep end with me." Oh. So throwing themselves off a ship for like 4 nights on a row. But that was the early days of that. So from a computer generated point of view, it was very, very early. Nowadays, it's remarkable. I mean, it really is. There's a moment in the new movie, in this No Time to Die, where there's a terrific chase sequence, and Bond is on a motorcycle. You've seen that in the trailer, and there's a moment when he comes up towards the camera and he throws the bike on the floor and he walks off into his hotel room.
Mm.
Well, that's not him. That's Paul Edmondson. That's his stunt double on the motorcycle. But you would be you look at it and go, that's Daniel.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely Daniel. Now compare that to the last time Daniel was on a motorcycle in Skyfall. Robbie Madison was the stunt guy that was an American guy, a very, very extremely talented stunt rider, a motorcyclist, but a particularly fine stunt rider,
Mhm.
was brought in to double him. And the dots, again, they were using dots, but it was again not in certain places. It was just slightly, you could tell it wasn't him. Do you know
Okay.
what I mean? You could tell it wasn't Daniel. In this new movie, you'd be very hard pushed to go, that's not Daniel when you look at him on screen. It's flawless. Many,
No.
many, many moments in this movie, action-wise, which are absolutely flawless. They're sensational. And that's what's happened over time. It's got better and better and better. And you do ask yourself, what now? Where
Yeah.
now? How could you possibly better this? It's very, very, it's extraordinary times, isn't it? What a
It
time to
is.
be alive, Thomas. Good heavens, I tell you, it's all go, isn't it?
It is. It is. I mean, I can only think the only place you can go is maybe like again. I go back to Star Wars because I'm quite the fan. That with the original Star Wars film is such an epic ending. They're asking where can we go? Can we do a bigger battle? And they just put the big battle at the beginning, and then make it so small and personal
It's
at the end.
yeah, yes, make it. Oh, that's true. You do the whole thing in reverse. Yeah, that's a very good idea. I bet somebody's going to do that at some point. And yeah, let's do the whole fight now.
Yeah.
Of course, the technology of doing that, you again, Moonraker was the Bond equivalent of space, and everything was wires.
Yeah.
Was very. Of course, the wires. Here's a tangent. However, we're staying with Star Wars and we're staying with action at the same time. So watch this this is how my brain works. I've just said the word wires, which
Hmm.
has reminded me that a conversation I had with Mark Hamill, stunt double, on Star Wars, which was uh, uh, who's Colin Skeeping. I nearly forgot his name there. Colin Skeeping was the double and stunt coordinator on a movie called Condor Man in
Oh,
1981 with Michael Crawford. Michael
okay.
Crawford, and it was an early comic book. So this guy, he was a comic book creator. He wrote comic books and became a sort of crime fighter and became Condor Man. Well, in the opening sequence of this movie, and if you've never seen Condor Man, don't read the reviews, just watch it and let it wash over you, on a Sunday afternoon. Perhaps it's still available on DVD. I checked it out. Um, the opening sequence um, has an animated character, Condor Man, but then has the real Michael Crawford and Colin suspended, flapping his wings, suspended above the Eiffel Tower in Paris. And he is attached to a crane, and that crane is attached to him via a piano wire. And I genuinely, and the size of that piano wire is not big. It's not because they couldn't. There no CGI in those days. You
Mm,
couldn't paint them out. It was very simply a case of you have to have something that can't be seen on screen.
mm,
So they may have painted some of the wire a slightly different color, or they've tried to keep it in a certain shot so that the background is more darker and they can paint it darker, maybe. But that's an actual piano wire. And he said nowadays, when he works in television and an actor is required, or a stunt person is required to jump from here to there. There are three cables on them of varying shapes and sizes. They're wearing a harness. There's every possible option of protection has been taken into consideration. And yet he said there I was suspended halfway up the Eiffel Tower with just a piece of piano wire attached to it. I can't believe I used to do it, but that's what used to happen. Not the sort of thing you do twice. And fascinating, absolutely fascinating. But there we
yeah.
go. That's how my brain works. You mentioned Star Wars, I go off on a tangent and come up with something else. It's tricky being me sometimes.
No, I think you mentioned Moonraker, and we're just talking about William Shatner going to space. We literally now have
Yes,
the Moonraker scenario of billionaires
we
sending
do.
rockets up.
That's it.
We've lived to see the science fiction take place.
Become science fact, as Cubby said. That's right. It's not science fiction; it's science fact. Um, it'd be nice if they were up there for a bit longer, maybe. There's all this build up, and then they go up, and you go, "Wow! Oh, hang on, they're coming back down again now. Wait a minute, I'm confused." So all over very quickly, unless time stands still up there. But would I want to see space? I don't know. Maybe I would. Would I be able to afford it? Well, no, obviously. But the dark web is a very interesting place for selling children. So I dare say that there's somebody who's prepared to give me huge sums of money for. No, no, forget I said that actually. Um,
Don't look on the dark web for fear of seeing myself on sale.
yes, and you going, how much? Oh, that's ridiculous. They're bidding against yourself.
Was
This
it
is
Julius
ludicrous.
Caesar? I think Julius Caesar was kidnapped by pirates when he was quite young, and then heard how much they're ransoming him for. Said it was insulting and demanded they raise the price.
uh, wasn't it Woody Allen who used to say that um, he was kidnapped once as a child, and a ransom note was sent to his father that said, "Leave $3,000 in a hollow tree." He found no problem finding the money, but he had real difficulty finding a hollow tree. I think that was the answer. Or the ransom note, he read some of it, and then he read it at night, and of course got drowsy, and then dropped off, and then sort of thing. So, yeah, kidnapping. I don't know. It's a tricky business, but yeah, that's it. That's the problem with technology nowadays. You have the good stuff, then you have the dark web. You create your own issues, don't you? With the rough, you must have the smooth, maybe.
Absolutely. But one of the great things about technology is that we can now all find your work. online. We can find
Oh,
Behind the Stunts.
what a seamless link. Well done, my friend. I was concerned where you were going with that, but that was brilliant. Yes, indeed, you can find my work anywhere. Um, uh, and it's purely on the basis that you do have to spread yourself thinly, I see, in this respect, because even though we are in the 21st century and people have access to all sorts, I know people who still don't have Facebook pages and they don't have Instagram and all this sort of stuff. So, you know, um, you can find me. I'm the Behind the Stunts as as a thing is available on Facebook, on Twitter. Twitter is at Stunt Central. You can find me on there. Follow me if you wish to do so. And there's I try and put stuff up on a daily basis. Really,
Oh
that's the
wow.
plan: is to put something up, something new every day. Um, and so that's and Instagram is Behind the Stunts as well. So you'll find me on there. The podcast is we've come to the end, the initial end, the run of the Bond podcasts. They're still all there, but if you whatever search engine you're using, if you type in Behind the Stunts podcast or wherever you find your podcasts, you'll find it there. So we've gone from Doctor No up to Die Another Day, which
Oh,
was the last one. So we're now going to leave a little hiatus before we kick off the Daniel period. And what I've been doing in between all of those is I've been looking at other movies, other action movies, and doing a similar exercise, kind of breaking them down, finding out more about them, speaking to those people who were involved, getting their opinions on stuff, and then that comes out on a Wednesday, and then on a Friday is a YouTube show which kind of expands a bit more
mm,
on the podcast side. So you get to physically look at what I'm talking about, and I talk you through certain sequences. We've had some copyright issues of late, but you get that with a clip show. Though I'm
of
prepared to
course.
accept that to a point. And in fact, I was pretty lucky that we had such a cracking run up until
Mm,
Living Daylights turned up, and it all went pear shaped. Having said that, I think that again we talk about technology and how things have changed. I wouldn't be at all surprised, if this Amazon takeover has had a great deal to do with
um,
distribution as far as clippage is
yeah.
concerned. So I may well be, just falling into this purely on the basis of how the world has changed. So we'll see. But yeah, so in between Bonds, I do lots of other movies, and we've got a bunch of great stuff coming up
Mm,
in the not too distant future. But explore it. That's the idea. I just want people to understand that this is a massive part of filmmaking. It's a
mm,
massive part of the Bond franchise. It's a massive part of action cinema, full stop, or cinema, full stop. There was a time when it was only purely action cinema. Well, now you've got um, dramas, thrillers, children's movies, animated movies now employ stunt people on a regular basis
yeah.
because they're using them for motion capture and many, many of those other options. So we explore all of that if we possibly can. Um,
I played the
and
video game, what is it, Call of Duty, and they
yep,
had their list of stuntmen
yep.
for the motion capture. It's extraordinary, and they showed
Yeah.
some of the behind the scenes, and it's impressive.
It's that you do see some of these photographs of guys on set and going, look, this is how I spent my day wearing what looks to be like a lycra onesie covered in tennis balls. It's very weird, and yet but you look at the final product. Oh, I see. Because there are games now. My son was always a huge game fan, and I used to look at the stuff he was playing. And when characters would fall over in the old days, they'd kind of just fall over and in a sort of Wreck It Ralph kind of way, where they would sort of disappear into millions of different parts.
Mm,
And now somebody falls off something, you go, wow, that looked really real. That's because it was somebody who was doing that.
yeah,
They've actually gone to that extreme of being able to get somebody to do that fall over, do something for real, and then motion capture it into a game. So it's technology is spectacular. I don't where it will end, we don't know, but it's involved in everything. So that's all it is. And on top of that, if you would like a copy of the book, which I've compiled a mailing list, is what I've done of interest at this stage. So on the strength of that, if you'd want to contact me or drop me a line and say I'd like to be added to the mailing list, if you want to email behindthestunts007@gmail.com, and I will do that gladly for any interested parties. And as soon as I know exactly information about when, how much, that sort of bits and pieces, then I will mail everybody. I've already sent out a mass mail not too long ago, just keeping people updated about what was going on. So you'll be added to that, and you will receive an email to say, this is how it's going. Don't panic. I'll let you know when everything's finally going to land. That's the plan.
Fantastic. And I can include that email in the YouTube description and in the podcast notes so that people can easily find and easily contact you for the mailing list.
Good man.
Okay. Jon Auty, thank you so much. It's been fascinating to hear about the history of stunts, the role Britain plays in that, and to touch on some classic films I think we both enjoy very, very much.
Thomas, it's been a great thrill. Thank you very much indeed. I've enjoyed it enormously.
Thank you. Goodbye.